Welcome, my friends, returning to the revisitation of the Twilight 2000 game system. This is Boomer. Like I said, this is the number 3 in the Lost sub-series, so there's a set of 3. I do not have the Mediterranean cruise. I just can't find it. I think here in the near future I will see if I can't get a free PDF version of it off the internet just so I can review it, but I'm not in. I've still got plenty of these other ones yet to mess with, so I'm not overly concerned about. The gist about this, of course, is in the first one, your team has become tasked to recover a Los Angeles class attack submarine that somehow survived most of the devastating naval combat of World War III, and then you're stuck on board as you're going through a number of missions. This one is the end all, the adventure plot. Handy here, let's take up more and more of my table space. The adventure plot is basically the rumor gets to the command that the Soviets have discovered a ballistic missile submarine that survived the war. It's stuck up in an ice pack in Greenland or Iceland or something like that, and let's see. As I said, we'll get to it. It still reportedly has several active or still unfired nuclear missiles on board, and that the Russians have launched a mission called Operation Polar Bear to recover it. And so it's the player's best interest and the country's best interest and the free world, so to speak, or what's left of it, to see that this thing doesn't end up in the hands of the Russians, and if possible, put it to the bottom of the ocean and call it a day. So we're going to the north of Norway. That's right, Norway. It says the Barracuda, as mentioned, the message recorded in 1996 issue of Jane's fighting ships as a Typhoon-class ballistic missile submarine, Boomer, and naval slang. All that can be determined is from the message is the Barracuda was shut down but is recoverable. 3 missiles and warheads are still functional. The sub is in the polar ice pack somewhere north of Norway. Something is expected by 1 April. This information is chilling, but not a great deal to go on. Okay. So, the gist of you're going to go north. You're going to get as much information as you can to locate this thing, find it, sink it, get rid of it. To do that, there gives you some brief information on how to get there. One of the most hazardous, perhaps, is making the channel run, which is heavily patrolled by the French, who don't want anybody, running into their country, keeping refugees out. So you have a potential encounter for a destroyer. It tells you to either, as a GM, it suggests just playing it down, make it quick and dirty, but make sure nothing gets damaged. If the Corpus Christi gets damaged, the mission's more or less over. You're going to Norway. You're going to meet the Gentleman King. The king himself will, there's maybe just enough damage to the sub that you need to get help for getting it fixed. This is why you encounter the king. The king of Norway then helps, in exchange for helping get the ship repaired, they utilize the ship to deliver a commando team in a remote fjord where at the end of the fjord, it's heavily defended, is the Russians' northernmost command post for dealing with military operations in their neck of the woods. Always nice. We got all of our personality types in here. I'm not going to go through those. We'll go through our Norway of 95 to 2001. At the beginning of the war, there's a limited amount of military, but there's still a significant military offensive takes place in northern Norway for control over various resources and operational locations. Surprising to the Russians that the Norwegians put up a really stiff resistance, as do the Finns. The NATO forces against the will of the Norwegians, who really wanted to sit this war out, but because they're members of NATO, they've given up certain rights to NATO in specific, which meant that the Americans and the British were able to, along with a few others, were able to send forces into Norway to fight the Russians. They have a pretty brief but brutal campaign up there. Ends up becoming a stalemate at some point. More of the assets, when things heat up further south and this stuff starts to chill down, a lot of the resources are pulled out and redeployed to other locations, leaving just a bare bones skeletal set of military units up there to help support the Norwegians. And at this point the war goes nuclear, and it says here, use of technical nuclear devices began in July. In the east, they were used on a massive scale, first against Chinese military columns and against the Chinese industrial centers. In the west, they were limited to first tactical attacks against frontline units. By November, the technical exchanges had gone strategic, and Norway did not escape. So a number of the major cities and military bases took a hit. Talk about the Russians still messing around up there. Most of the Russians' Arctic combat resources were shifted to Canada and Alaska as they tried to gain control of the oil. There are personalities of Hakon the Eighth, King of Norway. He's the younger brother or something of the original, who was killed in Oslo or something when the city's nuked. Turns out to be a pretty good king by everything I've read. The land, Svalbard, it's a series of islands and stuff that's pretty remote, and even in the modern day, there's just not a lot going on up there. Fishing and coal is about the extent of it, and there's this limited amount of, based on an 1800s treaty, the Russians are allowed to mine coal up there as well. This is why there's some Russians already on the island when the balloon goes up, so to speak. So we got the geography of the land, the climate, the history, called the Cold Coast, economics. It says the main features: Svalbard's free-war economy were fish and coal, and interestingly enough, that remains true in 2001 as it did before the war. Coal, Norwegian and Soviet mining operations were undertaken on the island, blah blah. Resident inhabitants at total, it says the entire group consists of about 863 people, not counting the Soviets as part of Operation Polar Bear. So they break it down. There's really not a whole lot of people on these islands, and most of them are concerned about survival. And they talk about the few communities there are, the necessities of survival: food, shelter, machinery, refugees. We got the blueprints and information on the Barracuda itself, its history. So that's where you disappeared to. I was trying to find this as my work schedule for next week. I love it, Pete. I knew I had it, I just couldn't figure out where I put it. That old age thing's creeping up on me. The channel, now we get into more detail. This is the Channel crossing, the French destroyer. If you want to mess with them, you have to breach to do some repairs on damage. Recon encounters on the road again. Then we get into these sections here. These were those crude maps that were meant to be handed out to your players. Like I said, since I never got a chance to play these games, none of these things were taken out, so they're still intact. Let's see. Locating its contact, getting questions answered. Here's our potential rumor mill. Additional personalities. The island that Chris is stoned. Trondheim, Norway, King of Bear. Now we start dealing with the Russians. Everybody's a race to get this submarine. 376 guards, motorized rifle division. Now the size of a regiment in effective manpower. Only divisional headquarters and a single rifle battalion, both under strength, are currently in Narvik. This is where that raid takes place, and your characters can be tied up in that. Then we make the trip up north to actually deal with Operation Polar Bear. Corpus Christi arrives, communications, counter tables for both animals, intelligence, potential animal roles. Salvage teams, soil patrols, trapper hunters, interrogation results, the ice pack, traversing the ice pack, movement issues, weather, dealing with the various land obstacles, additional personalities, some information on the ice pack itself. It's said because the Corpus Christi has its diving fins, or whatever you call it, are up there on the tower, and so because of this, it's the sub is limited to how thick an ice it can punch through. Here's a boat. This is a ship that can be used, the Russians used to get their crews to the site, and it can be stolen or sunk by your team. Barracuda encampment location, where the sub's at, various outposts or guard posts or what have you, attacking over the ice, work in progress. They're still trying to get the sub operational. Then we have an appendix down here with information and stats for cold weather gear and equipment. Snowmobiles, portable heaters, snowcat. Then they give you a small list of additional harpoons scenarios for the English Channel, fire and ice. This would, my understanding was, and I never bought the game system, I had thought about it when it came out. It was called Harpoon. It's GW's Modern Naval War Game Rules for Miniatures. I really wanted to get it, but I could. At the time, I was having harder and harder times finding anybody who wanted a war game. It's kind of more people were going to play in RPGs in my small neighborhood, and less on the war gaming side of things. But the scenarios are there if you had those rules or other rules to apply. But there you have it.